The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is probably the most explored Zelda game there is in regards of glitches. This incredible amount of glitches allows for the player to complete the game in a variety of ways. And thanks to Ocarina of Time having a fairly lenient save system, a lot of runs can be saved by, well, saving the game. However, this doesn't apply to all the tricks in the game, and especially not all runs. Looking at the 100% run of the game, saving and resetting just isn't an option for the most part, as either our DQ sword will just vanish, or the item we put on the B button will vanish. This in turn means that a great portion of the runs can hang on a thread sometimes, and the run can die within a blink of an eye. In this video, we will have a look at a few of these tricks, explain them, and what happens if the runner misses them.
We are starting off with a trick called Spirit Hover. This trick is used in a variety of categories in Ocarina of Time. The objective of this trick is to obtain the mirror shield without entering the spirit temple itself by using explosives to hover up the temple on the outside. Depending on the category, we either have a good amount of bomb chews or have to manage this hover with mostly bombs, which is way harder. Here we'll focus on the no IMWW category, which means we aren't allowed to write items into our inventory or make use of wrong warps in order to beat the game faster. This category also doesn't obtain Zelda's Lullaby, which means that there's no way for the player to beat the Spirit Temple the normal way. In addition, we hardly have any bomb chews, as those are precious and used for other tricks, meaning we have to hover up the Spirit Temple with pretty much bombs only. This is done by obtaining the infinite sword glitch in front of the temple, and then using a bomb to get stuck in the air, which is called hovering. After the first hover, we equip the hover boots in order to get less backwards momentum when backflipping. Doing so makes the hovers a little easier, as we still have to shield the bomb's damage in order to get more height. This has to be done 4 more times with bombs now, which has a fairly tiny frame window for the backflip input, as we otherwise don't gain height or get damaged by the bomb, which makes us fall all the way down. After those 4 hovers, we have to use bomb chews for the next hover and target it during the 1 frame it actually is active in order to unlock the camera. This allows us to turn around and target again for another 5 bomb hovers. Now, as if those weren't enough to deal with, we also have to pay attention to the Gwei that is wandering around and can actually target us. If we get any damage from either a bomb or the Gwei, we will fall down and the run is basically over, as we don't have enough bombs to pull this trick off again. After this is done, we equip the normal boots and perform a backflip onto the ledge of the temple, where we now have to turn for 1 frame to the left with the last input possible and backflip. Again, if we mess up the angle for this, we will just fall down and our run ends. Up here, we now draw the hook shot to aim for the seam on which we are standing to walk up it. Once this is done, we can hook shot the silver gauntlet chest and perform a super slide along with the hover boots to get on the other side and obtain our mirror shield. This is possibly one of the hardest segments in all Ocarina of Time speedruns, and a lot of runs die to this trick. Next up, we're dealing with the wrong warp from the Dongo's Cavern into the Nocturne of Shadow cutscene. This trick is done in the 100% category, and while the trick itself isn't hard, it's extremely dangerous as the run will immediately end upon failure. A lot of wrong warps done with Furore's Wind use a 1 frame window in which the player can trigger the blue warp and Furore's Wind, which in this case is on the B button for the player. Now it has to be on this button, as Furore's Wind is usually disabled in boss rooms for obvious reasons. The trick is set up by entering Kakariko through the main entrance from Hyrule Field, and then placing Furore's Wind. From here we then enter the Dongo's Cavern and beat it along with the boss, while we still have Furore's Wind on our B button. After defeating King the Dongo, we need to side hop or walk onto the blue warp and activate Furore's Wind on a very specific frame in order to have both the blue warp and the text box active at the same time. Once this has happened, we have to warp back to our previous location at a certain time. Doing so will force the game to run a cutscene in Kakariko, which then will be the Nocturne of Shadow cutscene. However, if we end up failing this trick, we are in quite a lot of trouble. Safe warping will get rid of Furore's Wind on the B button, and continuing isn't an option either, as the requirements for Nocturne of Shadow is to first have the Fire and Water Medallion. But as the 100% run beats the Fire Temple last, there's no way for us to obtain this song the intended way.
The hardest set of tricks is probably at the end of the 100% runs. Not only is this category among the longest, but it also has its most difficult tricks right at the end of the run. The objective of this set of tricks is to get right to the tower collapse and from there to make use of the cutscene flags in order to skip the tower collapse cutscene. This happens as the cutscene flag for getting caught by the Gerudos the first time and watching the tower collapse are the same. After beating Ganondorf, the Gerudo cutscene value gets reset back to 0 and thus has to be played again. However, if we end up getting caught by the Gerudos and exit the tower collapse without facing Ganondorf, we can skip this fairly long cutscene altogether as the value is still set to 1. But let's explain the tricks. After beating Volvagia, we set ourselves up in order to reach the seam of the blue warp with a backflip, which we perform along with a trick called Ocarina items. This trick allows us to play the Ocarina on any object that does not have a cutscene itself, so pretty much every usable item except for the Ocarina or the bottles. After this is done, we walk towards the entrance in a certain angle and set ourselves up in a certain position in order to clip out of bounds with a jump slash. From here we hold left, which then loads the blue warp again and makes us fly up. We release the control stick at a certain point and have to hit target within a 2-frame window in order to clip into the boss door. Oddly enough, every boss room has a loading trigger behind the boss door to get back into the temple, but doing so isn't intended as the boss doors can't be opened from the boss room again. As we are in the door, we have to pull the hook shot and look at the blue warp for a certain amount of frames. From here we align ourselves with the door frame and face towards the loading trigger. We pull out the Megaton hammer and then hit target and the hammer at the same time, which will trigger the blue warp and the warp back into the temple, resulting in a wrong warp that brings us to the tower collapse of Ganon's castle. Well, this was the easy part. On to the hard part. As we are in the tower collapse now, saving isn't an option anymore, as that would just bring us to the stairway before fighting Ganondorf. We now have to activate the infinite sword glitch and get into a certain position in order to start a true hover with hover boots equipped. If we do so during a certain set of frames after a side top, we will slightly move to the left, which now is a tiny bit away from the step seen on the ground, meaning we won't drop off anymore only by doing one hover. From here we have to do a certain amount of stance hovers, and this is where it gets tricky. Hovers in the game have a different height depending on the stance Link is in while in the air, but those height differences are so minor they literally can't be seen by the game's resolution. The stances refer to the knees of Link. If they face to the left, we have a left stance and vice versa. While hovering, we can determine the stance Link is in by doing the absolute minimal input on the control stick the game allows while holding up our shield. This input, however, is inversed, meaning that we have to perform a minimal left input for a right stance and the other way around. This is important though, as we need a very specific height in order to perform the last segment of this trick. If that wasn't hard enough, the timing of the backflip after dropping the bomb too is also different depending on the stance Link was in before he started hovering. After doing 9 very specific hovers, we have the exact height we need in order to sight up onto the door frame. Here we turn sideways with yet another minimal input turn and sight up onto the door frame again. After doing this, we roll towards the wall and turn again. This will clip us into the wall and we can jump out of bounds using a side hop. But wait, why is the height so specific? If we don't have the exact height value of 976.401 before side hopping onto the door frame, you will not clip into the wall. You will make it onto the door frame, but you won't clip, and no one really knows why that is. Once we're out of bounds, we have a 2-frame window to jump slash ourselves into another collapse room, from where we can then take the main exit of the tower and meet Zelda again. After exiting, the collapse cutscene won't play and we can head right to the Ganondorf fight. This trick has ended a lot of runs already, as there is no backup upon messing up. And the height values are not on screen during normal runs, so it's not even possible for the player to tell whether he made it or not before actually clipping out of bounds. Even though Ocarina of Time is one of the most lenient Zelda games there is to run, make it or break it tricks like this one can make a lenient game into a living hell. But luckily, watching videos isn't a living hell, so if you enjoyed the video and would like to see more, check out our channel or subscribe for more videos in the future.